Test, test, test. Test, test. Test, test, test. Please work. Test, test. Good. All right, so testing. What we need. Well,
And a lot of providers are patchworking things together to get your business. No.
In this ATEM mini tip, we'll be looking at a feature that is unique to the ATEM Mini Extreme in the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. That feature would be the 6 macro buttons that are built into the hardware. Those 6 macro buttons trigger the first 6 macros in your collection. What happens when you have more than 6, or you want to simply rearrange them? Unfortunately, there's no UI to do that, so to do it, we have to modify the XML. To show you that, let's step into Studio B. Here I have the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, and as you can see on here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 macro buttons. These buttons will trigger the first 6 macros that you've created in your ATEM software. But again, if you want to rearrange them, there's no interface to do that. Let me show you. In the ATEM software control, if I go to the macros menu and open this up, you'll see here that I have 7 macros that I've created. Macro A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I've labeled them as such just so it's easy to track as I move them around. Normally, obviously, you give them a proper name. If I want to move one of these, I can't. There's no way to simply drag and drop these around, which admittedly would be nice, but it's just not how it works. So for this example, I'm going to take macro G and move it into the A position so that it will be triggered by the macro button 1. Of course, if I don't want to do that, I can simply go to the run menu here, hit recall and run, and just trigger whichever macro I would like. But in this case, if I want to actually assign them to the hardware buttons, I'm going to have to move them. So here's how we do it. To do that, I'll go to the Save As menu, and I'll give it a name. I'm just going to call this macros, and I'll put it on the desktop. This is going to save out the XML file, which we will need to edit. From the Save menu, all I really care about right now are the macros. So to make things easier, I'll select None, and then turn on macros, and then click Save. I'll hide the ATEM software control, and here's the file that I want to edit. I like to work on these using BBEdit, but you can use any text editor that you like. The nice thing about BBEdit is how it color codes and automatically spaces the code. I'm going to collapse all of these by option clicking on this collapse triangle here, and then clicking on it again without the option key held down to expand it. By holding down the option key when I first clicked it to collapse it, it collapsed all the subcategories as well, making it easier now to see what I'm looking at. I'll open up the macro pool, and here we can see the macros that I've created. There's macros A through G with index numbers 0 through 6. Now, yes, the index numbers are confusing. The index numbers start at 0, whereas the macro position buttons start at 1. It's just the way it is. It's this way throughout the system. Everything starts at 0 in the code, not at 1. You just have to keep this in mind when you're modifying things. Okay, so remember, I wanted to move macro G into position 1. Right now, macro G is in index 6, which would be position 7, but there isn't one.
People ask me every day, what do I do to look the way that I do? When I tell them,
macros on the Blackmagic ATEM range are an incredibly powerful tool. They allow you to automate what you're doing on your production switcher, but also turn very complex setups into one-button presses. And that's why I want to create this YouTube mini-series all about how to create macros and some of the macros that you should be creating to make your life easier using your ATEM. And in episode 1 of this new series, we're going to create picture-in-picture macros for ATEM Mini and ATEM Mini Pro users. And let me explain why. If you look at the ATEM Mini and the ATEM Mini Pro hardware panel, you'll see that there's 6 buttons to do with the picture-in-picture. You've got the 4 location buttons, then that chooses where you want your picture-in-picture to be displayed on the screen. And then you've got an on button and an off button. Now, one of the bugbears that a lot of people have had with this is that those sizes of that picture-in-picture, when you use those buttons, the size and the location are fixed. You can change it in the software, but as soon as you hit one of those hardware buttons again, it will snap back to that default size and location that Blackmagic has set. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create macros to overcome that, so that you can create macro buttons with custom picture-in-picture size and locations. And then instead of hitting the hardware button on your switcher, you'll just hit the macro button, and it will not only be a custom size and location, You can also choose the camera that you want the picture-in-picture to use. Let's jump right into it then. I've got my A10 software control open here, and it is connected to my A10 Mini Pro. Now, to get to the macros menu, what you have to do is go up to the top here and click on the macro button. And you can see, if you're new to macros, you'll have a completely blank macro slate like I have. And there's two tabs to note here. You've got the Create tab and the Run tab. Pretty self-explanatory. You create and organize your macros in the Create tab, and then when it comes to running them, you go over there. And one thing that I personally like to have on and selected is this recall.
Start. Food. I am in progress here. Progress. Feel better.
Run. If it's off, what you'll need to do is click on the macro that you want to run and then hit the play button. But I like having it on because then as soon as I click on the macro, no matter which one I choose in this list, and they'll appear as we create them, as soon as I click on the actual macro name itself, it will run. I don't have to do that second step of clicking the play button. So before we go ahead and actually create our first macro, let me explain a little bit about what's going to happen here. When you're recording a macro, think of it as almost like screen recording or process recording. To use. Let's jump right into it then. I've got my A10 software control open here, and it is connected to my A10 Mini Pro. Now, to get to the macros menu, what you have to do is go up to the top here and click on the macro button. And you can see, if you're new to macros, you'll have a completely blank macro slate like I have. And there's two tabs to note here. You've got the Create tab and the Run tab. Pretty self-explanatory. You create and organize your macros in the Create tab, and then when it comes to running them, you go over there. And one thing that I personally like to have on and selected is this Recall and Run. If it's off, what you'll need to do is click on the macro that you want to run and then hit the play button. But I like having it on because then as soon as I click on the macro, no matter which one I choose in this list, and they'll appear as we create them, as soon as I click on the actual macro name itself, it will run. I don't have to do that second step of clicking the play button. So before we go ahead and actually create our first macro, let me explain a little bit about what's going to happen here. When you're recording a macro, think of it as almost like screen recording or process recording. What the ATEM is doing from the second that you hit record, it is monitoring every setting that you change and every movement that you make on the ATEM itself. And then when you hit stop, it stops recording. And essentially, when you hit the play button for that macro, it's just replaying those settings that you changed. So let's record our first macro there. A very quick tip to start is you can actually click in a designated space to choose the space that you want to fill with that macro. So a lot of people don't know that. They just hit the plus button here to start building the macro, and then it's going to choose automatically the next available space. But if you want to, like me, customize the layout of this macro screen that you have here, you can actually click a blank space first, then hit the plus button, and it will apply the macro to that blank space. So what we're going to do first is we're going to build 4 macros that resize the picture-in-picture screen to a size that we want, and also put it in a position that we want. And we're going to choose the up left, up right, bottom right corners. So we'll do up left first. So I'm going to choose this up left blank space that we've got here, and we'll call it picture-in-picture left, PIP left, and I'm going to say large. Before I click record, I'm going to bring the picture-in-picture on screen here, because what I actually want the ATEM to do, the very last thing I want it to do is bring it on screen. I want it to make all the dimension changes in the background before it then brings it on screen. So we're going to start it with it on screen first, and I'll explain why in a second. So it's on screen, as you can see now. You're seeing 2 of me. Now I'm going to hit record. And now the ATEM is recording every change that I make. All I'm going to do on my ATEM hardware panel is click the top left button to give us a starting location. There you go. You can see I moved over to the top left there. Now I want to make this bigger. I said it's a large one, so we're going to actually scale it up to about, let's go, is 40 going to be, let's go 35 on here. And we're going to reposition it so it doesn't look too bad. We're going to say roughly around there, looks good. So we've got a large picture-in-picture in the left-hand corner now. What we've done is we've scaled and we've positioned. Now, if I was to stop at this point, the recording, because the picture-in-picture was already on before, is we're going to create picture-in-picture size and location. You can also choose in this list, and when you hit the play button for that,
Damn right. Me present. I mean, okay, can you believe this? Everyone. Why aren't they saying it? They don't care. How do you get the viruses? Excuse me. right, said Beat, the sociologist. Oh, you can see my bread. You know what? I agree. Happy. Every little will be alright. You're wrong. Sexual limitations. So let me ask you, you still think they can't sue? Well, you like to argue, so I like to argue too.
macro, it's just replaying those settings that you changed. So let's record our first macro there. A very quick tip to start is you can actually click in a designated space to choose the space that you want to fill with that macro. So a lot of people don't know that. They just hit the plus button here to start building the macro, and then it's going to choose automatically the next available space. But if you want to, like me, customize the layout of this macro screen that you have here, you can actually click a blank space first, then hit the plus button, and it will apply the macro to that blank space. So what we're going to do first is we're going to build 4 macros that resize the picture-in-picture screen to a size that we want, and also put it in a position that we want, and we're going to choose the up left, up right, bottom right corners. So we'll do up left first. So I'm going to choose this up left blank space that we've got here, and we'll call it picture-in-picture left, PIP left, and I'm going to say large. Before I click record, I'm going to bring the picture-in-picture on screen here, because what I actually want the ATEM to do, the very last thing I want it to do is bring it on screen. I want it to make all the dimension changes in the background before it then brings it on screen. So we're going to start it with it on screen first, and I'll explain why in a second. So it's on screen, as you can see now. You're seeing 2 of me. Now I'm going to hit record. And now the ATEM is recording every change that I make. All I'm going to do on my ATEM hardware panel is click the top left button to give us a starting location. There you go. You can see I move over to the top left there. Now I want to make this bigger. I said it's a large one, so we're going to actually scale it up to about, let's go, is 40 going to be, let's go 35 on here. And we're going to reposition it so it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to say roughly around there, looks good. So we've got a large picture-in-picture in the left-hand corner now. What we've done is we've scaled and we've positioned. Now, if I was to stop at this point, the recording, because the picture-in-picture was already on before we hit the record button, we didn't change the on-off state. So that means that when we recall it, it's not going to change the on-off state of the picture-in-picture. And what I mean by that is, if we were to press this run button with our picture-in-picture off, it's just going to change the settings in the background and not bring it on air. But we actually want it to bring it on air. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the off button on the picture-in-picture on my hardware panel and bring it off air. The ATEM has now recorded that. And it's going to do all of the things that we just asked it to do, resize and position and bring it off air all at once. I'm going to add a pause in of 1 frame, and then I'm going to tell it to bring it on air. And the reason we add that pause in is now when the macro runs, what it is going to do is it's going to, whether the picture-in-picture was already on air or off air, it's going to bring it off air, resize and reposition, wait 1 frame and bring it on air. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to see things resizing and reframing while it's being put on air. So we get it to do all of the repositioning and everything off air, and then we tell it to wait one frame for that all to be done, and then bring on the final composition on air. I hope that makes sense. I hope I've explained it okay. So now I'm just going to hit the stop recording button because we're done. Click stop recording there. We can see it's applied itself to this top left corner. And if I go to the run tab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring myself back over to the right hand side, and I'm going to bring it off. But now if I click this PIP left large, bam, straight away I've created a macro that resizes in the background, resizes the picture-in-picture to the size I want, waits 1 frame, then brings on that composition. One of the good things about the ATEM Mini is I can now that I've positioned it in the right place, I can just use the on-off switch to bring it on air and off air. It's as soon as I click one of the location hardware buttons on the ATEM Mini or the ATEM Mini Pro that the size changes. But again, I've got my macro here that can just pop it back to the last size that I set. So what we'll quickly do is we'll create one for each corner, and then we're going to create a couple more macros that actually allow us to select which camera the picture-in-picture uses. because it's a little clunky right now. If I wanted to change this camera, what I've got to do is I've got to go into my palettes here, I've got to go to the upstream key, and then I've got to select the camera here. So we wanted color bars, for example. But we can turn that into a one-button press with a macro. For the sake of this demo, I'll just do one in the right, and I'll show you how we do that. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start with it on in the right-hand side corner. I'm going to go to create, click on this button here, PIP, right, large, and you'll do one of these for each location that you want, whether you want the four corners or whether you want it somewhere else. Now we're recorded, so we can set the size, and I think we had about 35, I think it was, roughly. And the location here. Just note, if you want real fine tuning of the location, what you can do is hover over these X and Y's and then drag, and that will move it. So you don't have to just type in the number here, because some people just use these arrows, and you can see you don't exactly get fine tuning here. So you kind of have to type, but actually what you can do is just drag, hover over and drag, and that will make it slightly easier for you to move things about. Okay, so that.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am honored to be your host today. My name is Nina Muhammad. I am a Microsoft Product Manager at Abbott Structural Heart, and I'm beyond excited to be welcoming you to our very first live webinar of our new ClipMD series. Today, we will be discussing the importance of proper imaging in identifying and treating mitral regurgitation. This will be the first of our three-part echo series. So look out for future echo webinars that will dive.
Position, we've got a position. As in done for the right. Now again, going to click the off button here, tell the ATEM to add a pause of 1 frame, and then click the on button. Stop the recording. And now we should have, I'm going to click the off button here, tell the ATEM to add a pause of 1 frame, and then click the on button. Stop the recording. And now we should have our left and right. And I'm going to click the off button here, tell the ATEM to add a pause of 1 frame, and click the on button. Stop the recording. And now we should have our left and right. So let's try it. I brought it off, and it was, you saw I brought it off in the right-hand corner. I'm now going to click this PIP large left. And there we are on the left. Let's switch over to the right, and there we are in the right. So we can go between the two with our new settings now. Now I just want to 2 more very quick demos with this. So the first one I'm going to show you is what happens if you don't give it the on-air command, and then I'm going to show you what happens if you don't add the pause. So let's create another macro here, and we'll call this PIP bottom left. And just before I hit record, I'm going to again turn on my picture-in-picture in the bottom left here. And then there we go, hit record. So now, as before, I'm just going to very quickly resize it. So I reckon somewhere around there-ish, maybe up a bit more. Let's have a look how that looks. Yeah, something like that. So now we've got our sized bottom left picture-in-picture. Now at this point, if I was to stop recording the macro and save that, I'm going to take the picture-in-picture off air for a second. Now look what happens. So if we bring on picture-in-picture left up at the top, there it is. And if we bring it off and then bring on the right, there it goes. We bring it off and now click PLP bottom left. Seemingly nothing happens, but that's not quite true, because actually all we've told it to do is to change the settings in the background. So if I click the on button on the physical switcher itself, you'll see the new layout in the bottom left does appear. Now that's simply because while we were recording, the only commands we gave the ATEM to do was to resize the position and resize the size. We didn't tell it whether to change the on-off state. So again, if we actually
Healthcare is backwards. Everyone knows it. But it's not for the reasons you think. It's not backwards.
Hey everybody, it's Lon Seidman, and in my review of the ATEM Mini Extreme, I was referring to using macros with the macro keys here to kind of replicate the functionality you might have with vMix using one of their virtual inputs, or OBS with one of their scenes, where you can basically have a one-button push to get a whole bunch of stuff mashed together. And in this quick video, I'm going to show you how to do that in a virtual set environment where you've got a subject keyed out on a green screen and a background that you want to follow that person each time you cut to them. And then we'll have a second person with their own background as well. Let's take a look and see how we can set that up. Now what we're going to set up here is have this image of the ATEM Extreme over that scene of my window be one scene that I want to cut to, and the other one is going to be this bear in front of me like this. And this would normally be fine if you're just cutting back and forth between 2 different things. But if I wanted to maybe cut to another camera at some point, it gets more and more complicated because I have to take the key off air and kind of go through all of this stuff. And I want to make it easy for my volunteers just to be able to push a single button and have it put all this stuff up on screen, and then have another button that can disable all of it and cut to one of the other cameras. So what we're going to do here is go in and set this up so that we can build macros that will automate this process. So we're going to begin with the picture of the bear over me. And what we're going to do is first, before we start recording the macro, is enable everything that we want to have turned off. Because what's neat about how the macros work is that it doesn't record a button push. It records the state of the button after you push it. So basically what we're going to do here is instruct it to do the opposite of what I currently have on screen. So if we go over to my full screen view here, I'm going to go up to the macro menu and just bring that in. And what we're going to do is just go over to the create button, and we're going to create this one called bear. I'm going to click on record. And now you can see things are recording. So what I'm going to do here is just move this out of the way for a second. We're going to enable camera 4. We're going to turn off these, turn this one on, and turn that one off. And then I'm going to stop recording just by moving this back over here and hitting the record button. And now we've got something in there called bear. So now I've got the bear mapped here to the first macro button. And if we go over to our shot that we currently have live on air, and I'll
Actually, if I bring
I don't know how the fuck this is.
I heard about Halo from some of my friends with dogs and decided to give it a try. The program in the app taught me to bond.
If you just bought an A10 Mini Extreme or the ISO, or you're thinking about getting one, you're going to want to stay tuned and watch what we have to offer here with our macro pack. By the way, completely free. We use these ourselves and we're just giving them away. It definitely beats making a bunch of tutorials on how to build this stuff. Just let people use it and have fun with it. So let's start off right at the back. We have transitions. If you don't know what a super source is, get ready. Transitions are awesome. And by the way, no one really has them. We built these for ourselves, and I think you can get some third-party plugins to attempt to do something like it, but Blackmagic doesn't offer these kinds of things. So they offer the super source, and we can just kind of jump around here and just see all the cool things a super source can. I think you can get some third-party plugins are awesome, and by the way, no one really has them. We built these for ourselves, and I think you can get some third-party plugins to attempt to do something like it, but Blackmagic doesn't offer these kinds of things. So they offer the super source, and we can just kind of jump around here and just see all the cool things, do something like it, but Blackmagic doesn't offer these kinds of things. So they offer the super source, and we can just kind of around here and just see all the cool things a super source can do when you move them around. Brian, you throw up the Stream Deck here. This is what you're getting, okay? Not only a bunch of macros for the A10 switcher, but this companion file, which gives you all of the buttons at your own hands, right? So you can't get this wrong. It only is going to allow you to click the buttons that are going to work for that transition. That's why it's cool.
Hey everybody, I am John Barker, and welcome back to this series on the A10 Mini Extreme. And specifically in this one, we're talking about SuperSource. So what is it, and how do you get the most out of it? In a nutshell, SuperSource is what Blackmagic Design call these complex layouts, usually used in maybe newscasts, or these days in digital conferences. Until now, SuperSource was only really available on the more high-end, more expensive A10 line, but it's now in the A10 Mini Extreme, and it'll let you show up to 5 sources at the same time. So a background image and then 4 cameras maybe on top of that. In order to get started with SuperSource, just connect up a few sources to your A10 Mini Extreme. In my case, I've connected up source 1, 2, and 3 with these 3 fake presenters that I've made. And I've also added a couple of things to the media pool here. I can see an image, which is my background color. You can put any image in here. And another one, which is a slide from a sort of fake presentation for reference throughout this video. I can bring SuperSource on air pretty fast with a dedicated button right on the A10 Mini. Let's take a look at that. Off to the right hand side here, you can't see that S source button. I'll bring it on preview, and then I'll cut to bring it on air. Here on the A10 Mini Extreme program output, you can see the default SuperSource layout that I have, which is 3 presenters and my presentation there to the bottom right. And just like anything else in my production, I can cut between my individual sources here. You can see that happening on the program out. And then I can jump into the SuperSource and show that to the viewers. So it's just like any other source that comes in. Now it is possible that you don't like those default layouts, but you can customize and create your own in the ATEM software control. Over on the ATEM software control, I can configure exactly how I want the SuperSource to look here in the SuperSource section of the palettes. As mentioned before, you do get a few layouts that were pre-configured by Blackmagic Design. But below that, you're able to make a change to each box. So in the box control, I have access to each of the 4 boxes that I can bring on air. Box 1, 2, 3, 4. And as I enable and disable it, I can show you the final output of how that looks. It disappears and reappears. Below that, I can set the source for each of the boxes. So in this case, I've set box 1 to camera 1, but in here I can change that to something else. So for example, I can change that to media player 2.
With MailChimp's customer journey smart, you can track when a customer buys something. Plan for them.
And then over on the program output, you can see there I have media player 2 has now taken over the top left corner. Maybe I can just change that back again to camera number 1. And that works just fine. Then below that you have position, size, and cropping options. And this is where you'll really be able to customize exactly where on screen and how cropped the image is. To adjust any of these parameters, I can just use the little slider here over the name of the parameter. So I just change the size there. You can see it happen in real time on the program output. I'll just set that back to normal. And then we can discuss a little bit how fiddly these options are. So when you're in there and you want to create this whole SuperSource layout, it can get a little bit fiddly at times. That's why I've created a final image of what I want my SuperSource to look like. I'm just going to drag an image into my media pool, what I actually want the SuperSource to look like in this case. So here it is, dragging it in and dropping it. And you can just about see there, it has a large image on the right, which is where the presentation will go, and then 3 small images on the left-hand side, where I want my 3 presenters to look. I'm going to drag that into the media player 1, head back over to Switcher, SuperSource, and I can take a look in this little Art tab here. The Art tab is where you'll set either the foreground or right. Now previously I just had a red image as the background, but now I want to set a foreground image instead. And that image I just dragged into the media pool, it actually has cutouts. It's a PNG, so it has cutouts of each of the places. And this can make it a lot easier to move things around and then hide any loose edges behind that cutout. So if I head back in again, I can make sure my media player 1 is still set up as the SuperSource output. And if I just cut to that right now, you can see, well, things don't look great. I have my old layout there, and then the image in the background. Back in the ATEM software control, I'll actually change my artwork to a foreground image. Pop back in again, and yeah, well, it's gotten better, but it doesn't look great. And this is when I need to start fiddling around a little bit more in the ATEM software control to get each of these 4 boxes in the place that I want them. So let's start with the presenter and box number 1. Back in the ATEM software control, I can go into the presets, into box 1, and then I'll make adjustments here in order to line that up. So I know first of all that the position X and Y needs to change. There it is in X. And then I can actually change the size as well, just to pull it down into position. The small little dials in the ATEM software control makes this, and there's some work to do. I wouldn't want to have to do this live. It's definitely something you want to set up in advance and then jump in and make the changes. Now for the second box, I can actually go into the copy section and make it a little bit easier on myself. In the ATEM software control, I can go to this copy tab, and here I can see I can take some settings from box 1 and copy them over to box 2 and box 3. So I'll do that. Copy over, and then I'll head back into my SuperSource layout, and things do look different than they did earlier. And that's because my other boxes are now hidden behind that box 1 on the top left. But I can fix that in the ATEM software control, of course, by going into the presets, into number 2. So all I need to do is adjust the Y position on box number 2. And I'm just doing that now. And it falls into place somewhere around there. And then in box number 3, I can do the same again. Taking a look at my program output to see where it lands. And in this case, box number 3 is actually my ATEM software control, but you can get the gist of that. Finally, heading back in one more time to the ATEM software control, because I want to adjust box number 4, which is the media player. And I know my size needs to be adjusted a little bit. I'll do that. And my X and Y need to be adjusted too. And here's my final look with all 3 presenters roughly in the right place, giving their presentation with that over to the right. Looks really nice, and something you definitely couldn't do on the previous ATEM Mini models. Yes, I know what you're thinking, this whole thing took a lot longer than you would think, and it's very fiddly with all those little dials. And I was thinking that too, and that's why I created the SuperSource Builder. And you can find a link to that below this video. You can hop over there and create layouts in a more, I would think, intuitive way, and then download the macros and bring those into your ATEM Mini Extreme. This project is pretty much in its early days, but I have more features planned on the way. So jump in there, give it a go, and download some macros to see how well it works. And if you want to support the project, I've also made available a pack of all these sorts of layouts, so you can jump in there and grab those instead, or start from those and build it on. Give it a go. A nice way to enhance the SuperSource is instead of using an image in the background or the foreground, you could use a looping animation instead. Now, the ATEM Mini Extreme doesn't allow for that animation to be brought in via the media pool, but of course with those 8 HDMI inputs, you can add a looping animation out of maybe a Raspberry Pi or a computer you have nearby. I've connected another input to my ATEM Mini Extreme, and it's this looping image of some stars appearing throughout the presentation. That will just run slowly and loop over time. As you might expect, I can go over to the Art tab here and choose the input that I attached it to. In my case, number 3. Then I want to place that in the background. And finally, over in my Presets tab, I'm able to bring the 2 images I want in front of that. I'll just choose this predefined layout here, and then make sure my boxes are what I expect them to be. I want box 1 to be camera 1, and box 2 to be camera 2. And now showing you the SuperSource final layout, I have my 2 sources on top, and then I have my background animation playing. It's a little bit subtle, and you can just see it happening there in the background. I've just thrown together this looping animation for the purpose.
The picture-in-picture right large up there, and then with the picture-in-picture on screen, click the PIP bottom left, you'll see it will just jump because we're telling it to change the size and the position, and because we haven't told it to change the picture-in-picture on state, well, it's already on air, so what it's going to do is change that position and the size. So we click the button. So let's record our first macro there. A very quick tip to start is you can actually click in a designated space to choose the space that you want to fill with that macro. So a lot of people don't know that. They just hit the plus button here to start building the macro, and then it's going to choose automatically the next available space. But if you want to, like me, customize the layout of this macro screen that you have here, you can actually click a blank space first, then hit the plus button, and it will apply the macro to that blank space. So what we're going to do first is we're going to build 4 macros that resize the picture-in-picture screen to a size that we want, and also put it in a position that we want. And we're going to choose the up left, up right, bottom left, bottom right corners. So we'll do up left first. So I'm going to choose this up left blank space that we've got here, and we'll call it picture-in-picture left. PIP left, and I'm going to say large. Before I click record, I'm going to bring the picture-in-picture on screen here, because what I actually want the ATEM to do, the very last thing I want it to do is bring it on screen. I want it to make all the dimension changes in the background before it then brings it on screen. So we're going to start it with it on screen first, and I'll explain why in a second. So it's on screen, as you can see now. You're seeing 2 of me. Now I'm going to hit recording. And now the ATEM is recording every change that I make. All I'm going to do on my ATEM hardware panel is click the top left button to give us a starting location. There you go. You can see I move over to the top left there. Now I want to make this bigger. I said it's a large one, so we're going to actually scale it up to about, let's go, is 40 going to be, let's go 35.
Yeah, looks good to me. Looks great. All right, let's do record. Testing, testing. Recording, 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 recording. Super source. Record all inputs and program. Okay, stop recording. Okay, let's take a look. Sure it's recorded. So. Okay. Recording, 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 recording. Super source. Record all inputs and program. Okay, stop recording. Okay, let's do program. I'm going to record all inputs. Choose there. Okay. Output. Okay, it's recording. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, that looks good. Okay. Stop. Good. So we're good, eh?